Welcome to the New Quantum Era. I'm your host, Sebastian Hassinger, and in today's episode, I'm joined by one of the pioneers of quantum science and technology, Alexandre Blais. He's a professor of physics at Université de Sherbrooke and the scientific director of the Institut Quantique. Alexandre's journey into quantum computing started more than 2 decades ago, initially inspired by a popular science article written by a future Nobel Prize winner. He spent time at the Yale Quantum Institute contributing to groundbreaking research in superconducting qubits and the development of circuit QED as a foundational architecture for modern quantum processors. We'll discuss how he, as a theorist, collaborates with experimentalists to push the field towards impossible goals. We talked also about the fundamental physics and real-world engineering behind quantum devices, exploring the ongoing battle against decoherence, the intricate mysteries of quantum measurement, and the surprising ways that quantum phenomena reveal themselves in these engineered artificial atoms that are created in the superconducting circuits he helps build. We'll also discuss the unique quantum ecosystem that Alexandre has helped build in Sherbrooke, Quebec, bridging academic research and entrepreneurship. From training and empowering students to launch innovative startups to attracting international players to Sherbrooke's Quantum Innovation Zone, Alexandre has been at the heart of efforts to translate quantum science into global technology leadership. Finally, Alexandre reflects on the bigger picture, the challenges of pushing quantum systems to ever larger scales, defying the universe's tendency to want to collapse into classical behaviors, and the promise that quantum computers hold for both industrial revolution and fundamental discoveries in physics. So please join me for a fascinating conversation at the intersection of science, technology, and entrepreneurship as we explore the new quantum era with Alexandre Blais. Alexandre, thank you very much for joining us. I've been actually looking forward to having this conversation with you. You and I have spoken a number of times, and I've always found it really interesting. Would you mind starting just by giving us a background on sort of how you found yourself on this path to quantum computing?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to the podcast. That's great. So in my case, I've been in quantum computing for over 20 years. So in fact, I studied in Canada, we have master's degree before PhD degrees. And so I studied my master's degree and decided like, hey, that looks cool. That looks fun. And in fact, at the time I told someone like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And the answer I got was like, oh, well, okay, you do something fun for your master's, but do something serious for your PhD. So that was in 98.
Wow. And which university did you do your master's at?
In fact, in Sherbrooke, where I'm now.
Wow.
Back. So this is a bit uncommon, but
yeah.
I mean, what I decided to do is something which was maybe a little bit risky. I don't know if I would recommend that. I was a bit naive at the time. I asked someone, a faculty member, would you be my advisor? This is what I would like to work on. I know there's no experts on this here. I promise I won't be any trouble. I mean, I just I need an advisor. Yeah. And amazingly, the person agreed.
And was that inspired by work from like Shor's algorithm or Aronov's, the threshold work, or any of the other Deutsch, et cetera? Were there papers that you were reading that were sort of inspiring you?
In fact, I didn't know all of that at that time. So that was indeed a few years after Shor. That was, in fact, it's inspired by a popular science magazine article written by Serge Haroche, who then won the Nobel Prize, and Jean-Michel Raymond was his longtime colleague, where they essentially said, I argued that, quantum computers would never work. That was basically it. And my first reaction was...
well, I'm definitely going to make my career in this then.
Well, my reaction was first like, oh, wow, this is actually a field of research. I had no idea. This is amazing. This is what, I really liked quantum mechanics. And I said, like, this is what I want to do. And then, impossible. I don't know. It sounds really tough, but I mean, as Feynman also said, it's a
Right.
fun problem because it's such a tough problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And so then after your PhD, you ended up at Yale. I guess were you a postdoc with Rob Shulkoff? Is that right?
With Steve, in fact.
With Steve. Okay, Steve.
I mean, there is one more funny story if you want. We can go back to to the grad studies. I mean, that will give you like a feeling for the background. So there was indeed no one in Sherbrooke working on this. Then there was someone in chemistry and someone in maths interested, and we had discussions. So that was, I mean, they were people to talk to, but in physics, nobody. And a postdoc from UBC came to Sherbrooke to give a class, in fact, on many-body theory. He had just written a book. And he was interested in how could one build qubits based on superconductors. In this case, ITC, high temperature superconductors, not aluminum, which is what is now used, which is superconducting at like well below below a Kelvin. But other materials, YBCO, it's called. It's a superconductor which is superconducting at something like 70 or 90 degrees Kelvin. Sorry,
Kelvin. Right.
And then we wrote a paper on this. And the next time I saw him, he said, "Yeah, do you mind if I start a company based on this?" And so that was a D-wave superconductor based. So you know where this is going. So so this is that became D-wave systems.
That's crazy.
And so for a while I worked a little bit with them when I was a PhD.
Yeah.
But that stopped when indeed I joined Yale to work with Steve Gervin as a postdoc.
Right. Okay. And so, I mean, you're a theorist, right? You're more a theory than, but you you seem that your career and your research papers are all very, very close collaboration with experimentalists. Was that the way it was right from the beginning?
Well, so when I joined, when I was at the end of my PhD, I had a scholarship from the Canadian government to do a postdoc and was trying to decide where I should go. And Yale at the time didn't have any really experiments on qubits, on superconducting qubits. There were first experiments that were going in that direction. Michel Devoret had just moved.
Right.
Steve had recently moved, Steve Gervin, and Rob Shulkoff had been there for some time. But looking at the place, I said, like, well, I mean, there is a mixture there of theorists and experimentalists. I think this is really powerful. This is what I want to do. I think this is the best place to go, although they were not the most advanced place at the time. And really, I think there is real power in that collaboration. What we're trying to do is really difficult. It's a really difficult challenge. And so we need tons of expertise. And that includes theory and experiments. And of course, that is also true, more broader than physicists, right? We understand that we need mathematicians and computer scientists and engineers and so on. But so indeed, I've throughout the rest of my career, then I really enjoy working with experimentalists. I mean, my biggest joy is when we have a theory proposal and then someone builds it and it works. I just find that completely amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So, I mean, were you at Yale? That was such an incredibly sort of foundational time for superconducting qubits. Did you overlap with Chad Rigetti or Jay Gambetta or the whole Yale gang?
The whole Yale gang. So I arrived in January 2003. At the time, Andras Walraff had been there for about 6 months. The experimentalist with whom I'm still collaborating 20 plus years after. Jay Gambetta arrived about a year after me, and that was great. That was great because by then we had realized, oh wow, the language to describe these systems and most superconducting qubits is really the language of quantum optics. But nobody there was an expert in quantum optics. We were just learning this, and for the last year, I'd been reading and reading about superconducting qubits. On the other hand, Jay was an expert on superconducting qubits. This is what he had done, but didn't know about superconducting qubits. And so we had this great exchange where I would tell him, like, okay, this is how superconducting qubits work. And he would go on, and this is how a master equation works. This is how a quantum trajectory work, all the foundational work in quantum optics. So it was really, really a great combination, and that was just a fun collaboration.
And I guess, I mean, the output of that in large part, other than the transmon qubit itself, was circuit QED, right? It's sort of an adaptation of quantum electrodynamics to the superconducting sort of resonator regime.
Correct. And so, in fact, circuit QED comes before the transmon. In a way, the transmon cannot exist without circuit QED, because one thing that circuit QED, so as you said, so you have a superconducting qubits, which is based on Josephson junctions, based on typically aluminum, which is, as I said before, a superconductor at the temperatures where we operate. But the standard way at that time to measure these qubits was to first encode information in the qubits in the presence or absence of a charge in a region of the circuit. So it's called a charge qubit, a qubit pair box. And Yasuna Nakamura had done a beautiful experiment already in 1999. But then that required to measure that charge. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And with circuit QED, what we realized is that there were other ways, much more gentle ways to measure the qubit based on simply probing transmission of some microwave mode, of some microwave resonator, which is coupled to the qubit. And as a result, you didn't need to measure charge. You didn't need to build a charge sensor. And so, and as it turned out, the transmon, its information is not encoded in absence or presence of a charge. It's a much more subtle encoding. In a way, it's transmon you should really think as an artificial atom. It's an hydrogen atom which has energy levels. And so, but the energy levels are not like 1 charge, 2 charge, 3 charge. It's really like a number of quanta of excitation in that circuit. And so before circuit QED, there would have been no ways to probe that qubit. And now we have, with circuit QED, we have that.
Right. That's really incredible. And I mean, QED itself, that's, I think, what Feynman sort of has the sort of set of lectures in which he sort of says, like, this is the most incredible scientific theory in human history because it's so incredibly predictive of natural phenomena, right? And it has, there's also, I guess, it's previously sort of been expressed in atomic cavity quantum electrodynamics. And was that sort of, you just sort of had to adapt those sets of rules to the circuit sort of regime?
Yeah, so QED is a much more general theory which describes the interactions of light and matter, indeed on which Feynman has worked and won the Nobel Prize for. But something which was pre-existing to cavity QED is, I refer back to Serge Haroche that I mentioned already, was this realization that you could do something which is still called cavity QED. You can place a single atom inside a single cavity, and for the group of Haroche in France, this is made by using what is called a Rydberg atom, a highly excited atom, inside a microwave cavity. And there, what is amazing is that they could exchange a single photon, microwave photon, living inside this cavity. Exchange this the atom would absorb this and re-emit it and reabsorb it and re-emit it, and there would be this coherent exchange between light and matter, the field in the cavity and the atom. And so this is really the inspiration that we had for circuit QED. But I think it's important to say that if you look at the literature, we were not the first. The 2004 PRA that introduces the circuit QED architecture was not the first paper in the literature that would make this parallel. This is something that was very much in the air. I mean, people were starting to think about this. In my PhD, I had already started to think about this. But the work at Yale, I think for the first time really laid out like, these are all of the essential elements, and this is the whole package with which you can accomplish that.
Right. And that, at this point, circuit QED is sort of the underpinning of all of the major gate-based modalities of qubits, right? I mean, it's applicable to not just superconducting qubits, but anything where you're trying to apply logical gates. Is that right? Or pretty much not photonic. Not photonic. Also not atomic, like neutral atoms or trapped ions. But spin qubits, for example, based on quantum dots, very much used, not all of them, but several
use these ideas. I've borrowed ideas related to the way we measured the qubits, but also the fact that these microwave resonators can couple two quantum objects which are far apart from each other at a distance. This concept of a quantum bus, right, where the interaction is not limited to nearest neighbors, but now you can have qubits or spins in that case, which are separated by as much as a centimeter, and suddenly they can talk. And this is something that has been demonstrated with spin qubits and semiconductors.
Right. You're still primarily working in superconducting qubits, though, right?
Correct. I was involved in some of the first experiments that showed this spin-spin coupling, or showed rather the not spin-spin coupling in that case, but rather the coupling of a single spin to microwave photons, and then people did the spin-spin coupling later, which is something that followed. But almost all of my work is based on superconductors. That's correct.
Yeah. And when you, in your superconducting qubit work, it seems like a lot of your focus is on preventing decoherence, extending coherence times, experimenting with approaches to fabrication and design that will lead to lead us to error-corrected or fault-tolerant qubits. Is that sort of the characterizing correctly what your main thrust is?
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to say it. I think one other way to say it is that, if you look at the field now, something which has changed is that when we started that, it was really pure, fundamental, like curiosity-based research. And now you could say, well, this is applied research. Companies are doing this, and it has completely transformed. But yeah, so now we are in a situation where Amazon or IBM or Google or Intel or so many and numerous startups,
Nord-Quantique
in Sherbrooke, are heavily invested in this area. And so what is the role of academia? Well, the role of academia is not to build a quantum computer. That cannot be a role. That requires too much resources. But the reality now is that there's a scaling challenge. Of course, we need to learn how to fabricate in a way which preserves coherence and also preserves our ability to control the individual components as we scale up. So that's a massive engineering problem with a lot of physics underpinning these problems also. But the reality is that scaling up today's technology would simply not work. If you just brute force scale up and say let's make 1 million transmon qubits in the way we're doing it, that will fail. That will not be a useful quantum computer. The reality is that we need to continue to improve all of the components of these devices and all of the operations on these devices. And that is something that an academic group can do. And this is what we are doing. Right.
Yeah, and not just improve in an engineering, like an incremental engineering sense, but improve our understanding of the underpinnings of the physical science that is intrinsic to the behaviors that we need to understand. It's such fundamental level of work that you're doing still. It's really
maybe
quite amazing.
I can make one example, which to me is surprising and refreshing. And this is a contribution for my work, but for my group, but other groups, including Google and others, and Michel Devoe's group at Yale, have contributed to that. But as it turned out, there has been, for the last 20 years, mystery in the field of circuit QED. So in the 2004 PRA, which introduces the proposal, everything turned out to be correct except one prediction. And that prediction is that the readout would be amazingly good. So as I said, you have a qubit, it's coupled to some resonator. You shine this resonator with microwaves, and there's transmission. You measure the transmission, and you get the state of the qubit. And the naive theory is that if you shine more microwaves at the input port, there's more signal at the output port, more signal, faster readout, better readout. And then the prediction was that would be amazing. But already, the first experiment in 2004, we realized, well, that is not the case. If you start measuring too hard, something bad happens to the qubit.
Right.
And that turned out to be something which was unsolved for essentially 20 years.
Hmm.
My first master's student back in 2006, I told him like, hey, that's an interesting problem. You should try to solve this. We came to something, but it didn't solve it. In 2016, Google put their finger on something which was the crux of the problem, but still not the full picture had emerged. And in the last year or so, now as a community, we've really understood this. But it's just amazing to me. Like, it's the physics of a single qubit. And it's a problem which had been out there for 20 years, and still, like, we need to understand that. So these are complex systems, even in their essence. And even when you take a single of these qubits, these remain complex nonlinear systems, and there's simply a lot to understand.
And is that dispersive readout that you're referring
Correct.
to? That's the challenge. And is there what is this sort of the essence of the solution to that problem?
Yes. So the essence is in a complicated way, we would call this multi-photon resonances. So essentially, you have an artificial atom, a system which has a bunch of energy levels, and you use only the first two to encode 0 and 1. There's the first two energy levels of this artificial atom are the logical states, are the qubit states. And for sure, you never want to explore anything else than these first two. And it turns out that the measurement is... well, let me back up 1 second. So how do you do gates on these qubits? You do gates by shining light, microwaves, at the 0-1 transition frequency. Any deviation for the 0-1 transition frequency would in principle not cause any transitions. So if you were to drive off resonantly from the 0-1 transition, nothing. If you drive on resonance, a gate. Perfect. As it turned out, readout is a drive, but it's a drive which is off resonant. This is what we call the dispersive readout. And for sure, we thought everybody in the community thought, well, that will cause no problems. But as it turns out, in nonlinear systems, there's something which is called a multi-photon resonance, where you can add up multiple photons of the drive to cause very, very strange transitions, say from 0 to 12 in your artificial atom.
Interesting.
And so understanding this, so this is something which had already been pointed out in 2016 by some work by Google. They had pointed out, this seems important, but not all of the understanding had emerged. And this is something that we've worked on. But something which is quite amazing to me is that in the last months or so, only after we've completed that work and published the work, I've realized that, in fact, that was known since the 80s in the context of the ionization of the hydrogen atom. It's exactly the same physics. It's
amazing. I mean, as you said, it's an artificial atom.
It's an artificial atom.
So the behavior is matching even at that level.
And it's the matching is it's amazing, right?
It's such a good example of how this interesting problem, as Feynman put it, it is simultaneously, as we're trying to build a technology out of these quantum mechanical building blocks, it's driving deeper and deeper understanding into the fundamental behaviors of the physical universe. It's really incredibly synergistic. I think the two pursuits are helping each other so much. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you've returned to University of Sherbrooke, and you mentioned sort of the role of academia. You're also leading Institut Quantique, which is a Quebec government funded effort that University of Sherbrooke leads, I believe, right? And is that sort of meant to sort of bridge academia and the industrial, the applied research in quantum computing?
Right. So indeed, so I'm the scientific director of the Institut Quantique, something which is an institute which was founded in 2016. So it was first founded based on funding from the federal government. We are funded by the Quebec government also. So what you said is correct. That institute has about 40 to 45 PIs. The number are increasing. I don't know exactly where we are now. 350 people, students, postdocs, staff. So quite a large institute which covers both quantum information, quantum engineering, quantum materials. But we also have members in chemistry, maths, political science, business school, and so on. And so the name of the grant the grant proposal that we obtained, which was about $30 million, which kickstarted the institute, was from quantum science to quantum technology. So our goal was really to make that bridge. And we wanted to make that bridge in a way which would have a long-lasting impact. So something that we understood at the time was that our major export in Sherbrooke, in quantum, was talent. We'd train people, they would go and work elsewhere.
Right.
And the question is, how can we reverse that? It's great. I mean, we're happy for our students to be our ambassadors. They should go and some should definitely go, but can we keep some here in the area? And if I have time, maybe I can tell you some of the actions that we've taken and the outcome of that.
I'm very, very fascinated by this type of public sector, quantum institute, quantum initiative, quantum strategy, because I think it's really vital for keeping the progress going because of that interdependence between applied and academic research. So yeah, please. I'm very interested.
Yes. So I mean, one thing that we recognize, and not just us, but there was the position of the University of Sherbrooke was that, okay, we would like to start companies right in this area, but if a professor starts a company, excellent. But at the same time, you just lost someone that you helped establish. You built a lab, and you just lost all of that expertise and the training that this person was bringing. And so the focus was really on, can we get the students to start companies? And the way we went about with that is, for example, we offered classes in collaboration with the business school for how to start your business, essentially, but targeted to physicists and engineers working at the Institut Quantique. Right, just general business knowledge, business model canvas type things. We also, and more importantly, we had about $1 million per year that we would give in seed funding. If you're Professor X, we've been doing research Y for the last Z years, great, continuing doing this, you don't need our help. If you want to start something new, however, if you want to transition from something else to quantum, you want to start a new collaboration, great. You can apply. Your application for a 2-year project will be evaluated by a team of Canadian researchers, and everybody in the institute is admissible. Everybody in most places would mean all the PIs. In our case, all the students, postdocs, staff members could apply. And the first year, one student got a grant, about $100K. It's not large, but still not small. And next to it, a professor did not get a grant. And it was like, oh, what just happened now? So there was a bit of a reaction.
Yeah.
But that person is David Roiguet, who, based on his work with that grant, founded SB Quantum, which is the first quantum startup in Sherbrooke. And they now have about 30 employees running since 2016.
Fantastic.
Their technology has been selected by NASA to be sent in space to do a detailed map of the Earth's electromagnetic field.
Oh, so this is a sensing technology. I remember reading about
sensor.
that. Yeah. Fantastic.
And that data will be used. So when you open Google Map, there's this little blue dot. It uses GPS, but it also uses other data, including the detailed map of the Earth's magnetic field to locate you. And so in a few years, every users of cell phones on the planet will be using data acquired by SB Quantum by this $100K.
Amazing.
So that's an amazing story. And this is only one of them. Then there's North Quantique, there's Qubit, there's we have several companies like this. And then IBM started to establish itself in Sherbrooke and won Qubit, a Canadian startup. And at that point, the government said, okay, there is something special happening in Sherbrooke. Yeah. And they created what is called an innovation zone, which is essentially a startup hub for quantum. And now there's 15 companies, about 200 jobs in quantum in Sherbrooke. Pascal is here, the French neutral atom company, North Quantique. and so many more.
Even, I mean, that was really impressive, being able to offer something to a French-based startup that would attract them to Canada and to Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
What was the what's the attraction for Pascal?
So they wanted to expand beyond France. That was a decision that they had made. But so why Sherbrooke now? Why not go to the US?
Right.
Well, they wanted to have talent. They wanted a place where there would be like people that they could attract to work in their company, and they felt like this is the right place. We have a nice story where the CEO of One Qubit came to Sherbrooke well before the innovation zone. Just when the institute was starting, really, and he had a discussion with students, only students. We didn't brief the students, like students and the CEO, and the CEO said like, oh yeah, well I'd like Andrew Firstman. I'd like to start a company, like to start a branch of my company in Quebec, and I'm thinking of doing it in Montreal. And all of the students said, no. You want to do this in Sherbrooke. We're here. This is where we want to stay. And this is what he did in the end.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I regularly point to Institut Quantique and Sherbrooke as being the best example of the sort of all of the pieces that you need to jumpstart a startup ecosystem, and bridge that, as you said, that academic research to the applied research that starts to have an industrial impact. So I think you're doing a fantastic job there. It's really quite exciting. We'll finish up, but I want to get your view. So I had this conversation with Steve Girvin, actually on Helgoland at the conference commemorating the 100 years of quantum physics, and he said that he ultimately, while the applied research is striving towards this sort of fault-tolerant quantum computer at scale that can do, crack all codes or optimize financial portfolios or whatever it's going to do sometime in the future. He thinks of himself as an experimentalist, and the systems he's trying to build are, the motivation is that he wants to have a many body system that he can actually control and do experiments on. If you had to choose one of those outcomes, you had to choose like sort of the industrial, commercial realization of fault-tolerant quantum computing at scale, or being able to do many body physics, quantum physics at and with enough control and enough precision, you could make fundamental breakthroughs in the field of quantum physics. Which one would you choose?
That's a tough question, because I really need to choose? I think we can have both. So, what I can say is that, I think quantum computers will, before being commercially useful, will be fantastic tool for discoveries.
Right.
And so I think this is, they are amazing tools. At the same time, I think building a quantum computer is kind of a challenge of the century, right? It's such a difficult problem. And seeing this through, I would love to see this happen, right? To see like, okay, we've achieved that incredible mission. There is, in quantum mechanics, if you go to the old quantum mechanics, there is something called Bohr's complementary principle, that if a system becomes large, it starts to act classically. There's a transition for quantum to classical. What we're trying to do is to go against that very fundamental principle. We're trying to build a bigger and bigger system that behaves ever more quantum. I think this is just amazing, right? We're trying to do something which was deemed impossible,
right?
But yeah, it looks like it's actually possible.
Yeah. Well, that's a classic cake and eat it too kind of answer, Alexandre. But I'll allow it. It's fine.
Sorry about that.
But that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really interesting. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation again.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, a production of the New Quantum Era, hosted by me, Sebastian Hassinger, with theme music by OCH. You can find past episodes on www.newquantumera.com or on Blue Sky at newquantumera.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and tell your quantum curious friends to give it a listen.